Hey there nation, and welcome to the show where we help you to play miniatures wargaming on a budget. It is I, Commander Cheapskate, and we are back with another episode of Cheap Shots, our series that shows you how to save money on the miniatures wargaming hobby. And on today's episode, we will discuss how to use the new Blades of Khaine Kill Team box set in your games of Necromunda. So as you guys are aware, the new Kill Team Salvation box set is coming out here pretty soon in January, and of course they have some amazing Kill Team miniatures. Primarily they have Blades of Khaine. Now in this picture here you can see they just primarily have Striking Scorpions, but apparently with this Kill Team box set you can make aspect warriors of Striking Scorpions, Howling Banshees, as well as Dire Avengers. So I'm not much of a Warhammer 40,000 guy, so I'm not really all up and up on the up and up on the whole Eldar or Eldari elite units, but that's pretty much what you get in this box set, and that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about using this Kill Team box sets in your games of Necromunda. If you guys remember, I've actually done a couple of episodes before of Cheap Shots where I've taken different Warhammer 40,000 Kill Team box sets and talk about how you could use them in Necromunda so that way you can play multiple games. And unfortunately, with inflation being the way it is and the way the economy is, being able to use miniatures for multiple gaming systems is just going to be the way of the future, unfortunately, because of the way the economy is currently in the United States and probably around the world as well. So because of that, being able to use the same box of miniatures for multiple games is like the ultimate cheapskate way of playing. And since I'm a cheapskate, I'm really big about that. So in this video, what we're going to do is we're going to do a couple of things. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about exactly what the box set's contents contains. We'll also discuss the potential narrative of how you could use these fighters in Necromunda. We'll discuss the gang's play style as well as provide a 2,400 credit starting roster using this box set. We'll also demonstrate how to play this gang on the tabletop by going over Tabletop Tactics. We'll provide how this gang could develop throughout a campaign and give our overall conclusion on this box set. And because this video is a little bit more of a deeper dive, I will put timestamps in the description box down below so that way you can click and navigate to the portion of the video that intrigues you the most. So that being said, let's get this video on a roll. So first of all, let's talk about the box set contents. So from my understanding, from what I've looked so far online, this is going to contain 10 Eldar Aspect Warriors, and like I mentioned before, you don't only have to make Striking Scorpions out of this. You can actually make Striking Scorpions, Dire Avengers, as well as Howling Banshees out of this box set as well. And you can actually use them interchangeably, and you have these miniatures using different aspects, and you can mix it up in your kill teams in Warhammer 40,000 Kill Team. And because of that, we're going to be using that same idea when we actually create this gang for Necromunda. We'll be using all three different aspects that this box set provides for our Aspect Warriors, and we'll be using that as well. And since these are Warhammer 40,000 miniatures, and since Necromunda takes place in the Warhammer 40,000 setting, it's a very easy transition to use these miniatures in your games of Necromunda. However, though, there will be some people who, of course, will try to argue that you can't, and that is why we're going to go with the background narrative of this gang and talk about why you should be able to do so. Narratively speaking, we're going to make this gang into a House Van Sar Outcast gang. And the nice thing about Outcast gang rules is that they're very flexible and adds a lot of variety to the type of miniatures that you can use on the tabletop. And since these Eldar look so alien, and at the same time look so high-tech and high-speed, we're going to say that they're Van Sar. After all, if you look at this Aspect Warriors and their armor, and you compare it to the armored body gloves that House Van Sar guys carry, it pretty much looks pretty similar enough. All right, it's that simple. It's not a big stretch of the imagination either. House Van Sar has always looked the more futuristic and alien of all the gangs and all the houses that are on Necromunda, so it's an easier transition. If your opponent wants to get really upset about it, you can just tell them that, narratively speaking, this is what happens when House Van Sar decides to mess with Xenos technology, not really sure exactly what it's going to do, and this is the end result that happened to them. It kind of changed them a little bit. You can say it like that as well. After all, their armored body gloves for House Van Sar as well as his aspect armor looks very similar as well. And just like always, we're going to keep that age-old adage of Necromunda miniatures. Any miniature is a Necromunda miniature when you think about it, because of how crazy and diverse the Necromunda universe really is. So when it comes to the playstyle of this gang's going to use a mix of Striking Scorpions, Dire Avengers, as well as Howling Banshees. It's going to be a very fast-paced moving gang. We're moving across the battlefield very, very quickly. And it's going to be kind of like an anti-Van Sar list. Traditionally speaking, most Van Sar lists usually have to want to stay back. They don't want to engage. They want to shoot at their opponents from a distance. This gang is the complete opposite of that. You're closing the distance towards your enemy. You're taking the fight to them directly into their face. At the same time, you'll also be using Infiltrator special rules skills quite throughout this entire build as well, in order to help you to close that distance to engage your enemy as well. And oddly enough, this is going to actually have a good balance between shooting as well as fighting forces. So you can have half your you're roughly about half of your gang will be dedicated to long-range shooting, while the other half will be dedicated to close assault. So that part is going to be a really nice aspect to add as well. At the same time, since we're using the Aranthian Succession rules, we're going to have a good balance of shooting and fighting with weapon upgrades to the maximum. We're going to take hotshot last packs, we're going to take focusing crystals, we're taking infra sights, we're taking photo goggles, all kinds of good gear to help you to be really destructive on the tabletop as well. At the same time, we're also going to be using the new Ashwave Grav Cutters that have been released from Games Workshop's expansion on Necromunda, which is basically called the Ruins of Yarland. They talk about this is actually a thing that advanced our gangs can now take, and since this is an Outcast game from House Fanstar, you'll be able to use those. Now, granted, none of the miniatures actually are riding grav cutters. I will give you that. However, if you look on the back of each of these aspect wars, they have these really big, bulky energy packs, I guess what you would call them, power packs on their back. The Striking Scorpions have them, same with the Dire Avengers and the Howling Banshees. You could say that's some kind of anti-gravitational device that let them zip around the battlefield anyway. So that's another cool thing that is awesome about using these miniatures. So now that we're going to talk about the play style of these miniatures, let's go ahead and talk about exactly what your roster will consist of. So your roster will be a Blades of Khaine starting roster for Necromunda or Aranthian Session at 2,400 points. This is going to be a House Fanstar Outcast game like we mentioned earlier, and the reason why we have 2,400 credits is because you can get additional 400 credits to KC fighters to use for vehicles as well as mounted fighters in your campaigns in Necromunda if you go out to the Ash Waste. Now granted, none of these guys actually have vehicles in this box set, but we're going to use the power of imagination and pretend that these guys do have like little anti-gravity grav cutter things attached to their back, so that way they can zip across the battlefield. So let's go and talk about exactly what your gang is going to consist of. So first of all, you're going to use your Striking Scorpion Exarch that's available in this box set, and you're going to make this person your Underhive Outcast leader as well. And this guy's going to cost you 390 credits. This person's going to have the close combat stats. If you guys are unaware, Outcast leaders have 4 different stats they can choose from. You're going to use what I like to call the close combat stats. What that means is this fighter's going to have a 5-inch movement, a 2+ weapon skill, a 4+ ballista skill, 4 strength, 3 toughness, 2 wounds, 4 initiative, 3 attacks, 6 leadership, 6 cool, 4+ for willpower, as well as 7 intelligence. So he's got a really good balance of close combat stats as well as psychology stats to make you do very well in the battlefield. You're also going to make this fighter a mastermind archetype so that way you get access to the cunning skill tree. Now this guy's going to have armor under suit and mesh armor, which is going to give him, and also packing a high straw pattern energy shield. What that's going to do is going to give him a 2-up armor save against melee attacks as well as 3-up save against range attacks as well. Now for weapons, this guy's packing a shock stave as well as a last carbine, a sub carbine with focusing crystal as well. He's also going to have photo goggles so that way he can shoot in the dark as well as filter plugs. Now you might be thinking, Commander Chiefskate, why are you putting the filter plugs on this? We only had 10 credits left over, so add a little bit of chemical and gas and tox attack protection against any opponents with that. Granted, it's only one use, but that's all you need it for. And he's also going to be mounted on a Fanstar Ash Waste Grav Cutter, so that way he can zip around the battlefield and take full advantage of being a mounted fighter. And he's going to have the Infiltrate special skill, so that way he can pop up anywhere on the battlefield to bring it to your enemies. Now, with the equipment list that we give this guy, he's going to have 5 attacks on the charge. He's got 3 attacks base, and when he's paired up with a weapon, either a shock stave and his high strike energy pattern shield, or his last carbine with a shock stave, or high strike energy shield with a last carbine, whatever combination you want to do, it's going to give him 5 attacks on the charge. It can make him very, very deadly when he engages in close combat. At the same time, he is mounted on a grav cutter, but if you're actually taking place in a scenario that has no vehicles, that's perfectly fine because you can leave the grav cutter alone, and this person can still fight as well. Now, the last sub-carbine does have a focusing and critical attached to it, which means that this weapon has a rapid-fire weapon at strength 3 with -2 AP. It's also got the sidearm trait so that we can take that -2 AP in close combat as well, which is going to be really nice too. And he's also got a shock stave, so that way he can take full advantage of ride-by attacks with that shock stave with that 2-inch versatile trait. And if I remember correctly, I believe the Scorpion Exarch has access to like a spear-looking weapon in that box set, so you could say that's the shock stave that the guy is using. Afterwards, you're going to have 2 champions in this, where you have 2 Dire Avengers. You could take 2 of these Dire Avengers and make them your Outcast Champion number 1 and Outcast Champion number 2, and both of them will cost 170 credits apiece, and they're both equipped exactly the same. Both have the Mastermind archetype, so that way they get access to the Cunning skill tree. They're also going to have armor under suit and mesh armor, giving them that 4+ armor save, which is going to be really nice as well. And for their primary weapons, you're going to equip them with long lasts with focusing crystals, and equipped with infra sights on top of that. That long last with the focusing crystal will give you a 36-inch range weapon that's going to be shooting at Strength 4 with -2 AP. And it's also got an infrared sight, which means your opponents will not be able to benefit from partial cover, and at the same time you can shoot in all conditions, especially if blackout conditions or visibility conditions are also in effect. Now this fighter is going to have a backup weapon, which is going to be a last pistol. I highly suggest that you actually get a hotshot last pack for that last pistol as soon as possible, as well as some kind of equivalent close combat weapon to make this guy a little bit more survivable. A power sword would actually be really awesome on this dude as well. And at the same time, they're also going to give these guys Overwatch. That way they can interrupt enemy activations by shooting at them with those long lasts with focusing crystals and infrared sights, which is going to be able to make you control all conditions on the battlefield. And since you have two guys that can do this, you can really screw up your opponent's plan. It's going to psychologically message your opponent, and they got to be very careful about how they're going to do their movements, knowing the full well these guys can pop shots anytime that they want to. Now that we're going to have two more champions, and you might be thinking, Commander Cheapskate, you're only allowed to have two champions in a normal roster. Normally you'd be correct, but since we're using Aranthian Succession campaign rules, we can double the number of champions in our gang. Just keep in mind though, when you do that, you do have to double the amount of fighters you have to represent that. So it has to have that same gang composition with the gang fighter X rules. Now you're going to have two Howling Banshees in this list as well. These two Howling Banshees will represent Outcast Champion number 3 and Outcast Champion number 4. Now these two fighters will cost 290 credits apiece. So let's talk about exactly what they're going to be equipped with. They're going to have the Mastermind archetype, so once again they can get access to the Cunning skill tree. And they're also going to have armored undersuits and mesh armor, giving them that 4+ armor save as well. Now, for their primary weapon, you can give them a power axe. That power axe is going to give them strength 5 -2 AP on the attack. It's only 1 damage, but that's perfectly fine because it's strength 5. It also has the disarm, which is kind of an added perk because if you roll a 6 to hit, you'll be able to disarm your enemy, which is all kinds of fun. Now, for their primary shooting weapon, they're going to use a last sub-carbine with a focusing crystal on top of it as well. So that way, they can also get that rapid fire strength 3 with -2 AP weapon with the sidearm trace, that way they can use this in close combat as well alongside with their power axe. Now at the same time, we're also going to give these guys photo goggles so that way they can see in all visibility conditions as well. And they're also going to give these guys photon flash grenades, and that way if you throw these grenades at your enemy, it could take away your enemy activations, which is going to help you to engage and kill your opponents on a much easier ability to do that. They're also going to be mounted on the House Van Sar Ashways grab cutters, that way they can zip around the battlefield. And they both will have the infiltrate skill, so that way they can pop up anywhere on the battlefield as well. Ideally, what you're going to do is you're going to pair your two Howling Banshees with your leader, so that way they can kind of create their own little assault fire team. That way all three guys can zip in directly towards an exposed flank or the rear and catch your enemy in a crossfire as well. So very, very powerful build with these two guys. Alright, so up next we're going to have two more Dire Avengers in this one. So you're going to have 4 Dire Avengers, 2 Howling Banshees, and the rest will be Striking Scorpions for this list. Now your 2 Dire Avengers will represent Outcast Hive Scum number 1 as well as Outcast Hive Scum number 2, and both these guys will cost 155 credits apiece. Now both of them will have armor undersuits and mesh armor, so that gives them that 4-up armor save. They're also going to have master crafted hotshot last guns equipped with focusing crystals as well. And they're also going to have infra sights on those hotshot last guns with focusing crystals. So like I said, we're going to go full blown with the weapons upgrades on this one. That last gun, because it's master crafted, means you get 1 reroll per battle in case you miss a very critical shot. It's also going to be a strength 4 because of the hotshot last pack, and when combined with the focusing crystal, it's going to give you -3 AP, which means your opponent's armor saves are going to basically get torn up like paper because that's how powerful it is. Now granted, it's only 1 damage, but that's perfectly fine though, because you also have an infrasight attached to it as well, which means you can shoot in all visibility conditions and your opponents do not benefit from partial cover. You're going to be able to pop these guys from a pretty good distance and really screw up your enemies. You might be able to punch their armor, might take off only a wound, but and if you don't wound it, at least it'll pin your opponents, so that's a nice thing about that as well. My suggestion for you for these Dire Avengers is to get a hotshot last pack for their pistols as quickly as possible, maybe upgrade them with a focusing crystal as well, so that way it's a little bit more deadly in close combat. And if you want to, I would suggest getting a weapon for these guys, probably a power weapon like a power sword or a chain sword as well. That could be really helpful in close combat in case these guys get charged against. And lastly, you're going to have 3 Striking Scorpions in this group. It's going to represent Outcast Hive Scum number 3, 4, and 5. And each of these guys are going to cost you 260 credits apiece. So let's talk about exactly how they're equipped. First of all, they're going to give them armored undersuit as well as mesh armor. You give them that 4-up armor save as well. And these guys will also be mounted on grab cutters, so that way they can move around the vehicle as quickly as possible in the battlefield. And they can also use their ride-by rules to attack with their weapons. Now, if you're playing a scenario where vehicle rules are not allowed or mounted fighters are not allowed, no biggie. You just leave the grab cutters back at home home, and you just fight on the tabletop as usual. Now for their weapons, you give them a chainsword, which is basically kind of basic as a weapon. It's only giving them a strength 3, but they get +1 to hit in close combat, and at the same time they also get parry. And the reason why I chose chainsword is because that's exactly what they're carrying in the box set, so it just kind of makes sense to do that. Now their primary shooting weapon, however, is going to be a hotshot master-crafted last pistol with a focusing crystal. What that basically means, of course, is that pistol will be shooting at strength 4. It's going to have -3 AP, cause 1 damage as well, and because it's master crafted, you get to re-roll once per battle in case you miss a critical shot, which would be kind of nice to have that as well. You're also going to equip these guys with photo goggles, so that way as they're zipping around the graph cutters, they can throw those and actually take away enemy activations as well. And you're also giving them photo goggles so that way they can fight in all visibility conditions and still see what's going on. Now, these guys are going to be really good at close combat. You can have these guys zip around the battlefield, deactivate your opponent's activations using photon flash grenades, finish them off in close combat with chain swords and hotshot last pistols, and you're going to cause all kinds of destruction for your enemy as well. And that is going to make up your roster for this list. So now that we're going to talk about exactly what your rosters consist of, let's talk about exactly how you're going to use these guys on the tabletop. Alright, so let's talk about exactly how you're going to use this gang on the tabletop with our Tabletop Tactics. As you can see, I have a little bit of a strip map here on a 4x4 table right over here. The orange hexagons represent your enemy fire teams, and at the same time, you're going to have 4 fire teams in this gang, and this is how you're going to pretty much deploy them. You have Assault Fire Team number 1, which is represented by this blue box up here. It's going to consist of your leader as well as champions number 3 and 4. These guys are armed with the power axes as well as mounted on graph cutters. They also are using the infiltrate special rule to pop up in the enemy rear. If you can, find some corner where your enemy doesn't have fighters at, so that way you can fully envelop your enemy in a 3-way attack. Now, Assault Fire Team number 2 is going to be put on the flank, whether it's on the right or the left-hand side. Whatever one is more tactically advantageous to you, that's the one you're going to consist of. Now, Assault Fire Team number 2 is going to consist of Hive Scums 3, 4, and 5. These are your striking scorpions who are mounted on their graph cutters with their photon flash grenades, their chain swords, as well as their master-crafted hotshot last pistols with focusing crystals. After that, you have your 2 support fire teams. So fire team number 1 consists of your champion number 1 and Hive Scum number 1. These are your 2 Dire Avengers, the guys armed with the long last as well as the hotshot last gun. And the exact same mirror image is going to take place with support fire team number 2, which is represented by this box over here. Now, generally speaking, this is going to pretty much be how you'll deploy your gang when the battle starts. Now, when the turn, of course, happens, what you're going to try to do is this. First of all, you're going to have your Assault Fire Team number 1 and Assault Fire Team number 2 zip in directly towards the flanks using their graph cutters. And if you are within range, you're going to try to toss your photon flash grenades directly into your enemy fire teams. So that way, when those explosions go off, you can deactivate your enemy's activations by doing so. Nice little, neat little trick taking place there. That's what those yellow lightning bolts represent. Now, while that is happening, of course, your Support Fire Team number 1 opens up on one half of your enemy using their long last, as well as their hotshot last gun, and they do exactly the same thing with Support Fire Team number 2 with the second enemy fire team. Hopefully you'll be taking out 2 targets at a time by doing this. Don't forget that your champions also have Overwatch, so in my opinion, have your Hive Scum shoot first, and if your enemy tries to activate anybody afterwards, then take them out with Overwatch from your champions. So that's exactly how to go about doing so. Hopefully what you'll be able to do is pop off a couple of guys in your enemy ranks, and a couple of those guys will be deactivated, which then you go in for the kill starting on turn 2. Now in turn 2, what ends up happening is you charging your Assault Fire teams directly into your enemy, and these guys should be engaged in close combat. Using shock staves as well as using your last carbines with power axes, you should be chopping up guys over here with your Assault Fire Team number 1. Chain swords and hotshot last pistols with your Assault Fire Team number 2, you should be chopping up on both sides. While that is happening, your fire support teams just begin to move forward by doing double movements, trying to close a distance, that way they get within closer range towards your enemy. Now, if you can make it all the way to turn number 3 using this strategy, your Assault Fire teams are still engaged in close combat with your enemy, but now your Support Fire teams are also within range to do some really close quarters battle by shooting at close range directly towards your enemy. Though once again, I would have your guys' Hive Scum shoot first, so that way they can take out targets, and then have your champions shoot afterwards, and using their Overwatch ability to kind of stop your opponents from activating any fighters. And then, of course, anything that happens afterwards, you can then charge in your fire support teams and then finish everybody else off in melee combat. That's the reason why I would suggest that you get better close combat weapons for your 2 fire support teams as soon as possible. And that is pretty much how you're going to use this gang on the tabletop in your games of Necromunda. Now, as for campaign development, as your campaign continues this game, my very first suggestion to you is recruit a rogue dog as soon as possible. Now, normally I usually recruit rogue dogs at the very beginning of a list. However, you don't have any miniatures in this box set that could represent a rogue dog, so that's the reason why I didn't recommend doing one. You're going to use all 10 fighters to be members of your gang, and if you want to, you can scrounge up a rogue dog somewhere else if you want to, or not even have one, because simply speaking, rogue dogs never actually have to go on the battlefield for your campaign, so keep that in mind. In my opinion, when it comes to your campaign development, the first thing you should do is get close combat weapons as quickly as possible for the rest of your gang. For your Dire Avengers, for example, either give them power weapons or give them chain swords or something like that in order to protect themselves in close combat against your opponent as well. Secondly, I would also go after hotshot last packs for weapons that are last-based weapons that don't have them. So for example, your Dire Avengers, for example, have backup last pistols. Get them hotshot last packs, that way they can use those or for backup shooting weapons and use them in close combat. Imagine a Dire Avenger character using a power sword and a hotshot last pistol in close combat. It'd be absolutely devastating for your opponents. And lastly, of course, get respirators. As you can see, all these characters are masked up with these helmets, and you can get respirators for your gang, make them a little bit more survivable against environmental effects. You could also use it against gas and toxic attack weapons. It's just all kinds of good for your gang in order to use those things. And that's exactly what I recommend you do as to develop your gang and to make it better as your campaign develops. So there you guys have it. Then in conclusion, this is exactly how I would use your Blades of Khaine kill team in your games of Necromunda if you wanted to create a kill team that could be used for both gaming systems. After all, you will be able to use these box sets not just for kill team as well as for Necromunda. You could also use them for Warhammer 40,000 boarding actions. You could also use them in Warhammer 40,000 as well. So like I said before, these kill teams are absolutely beautiful. Games Workshop has been doing a really good job with these kill team miniatures that have been popping up over time. And at the same time, this box set's got some pretty good flexibility as well with the different scopes that you can use, and that same flexibility can be applied on the tabletop for your games in Necromunda as well. And like I said before, the reason why I'm doing this cheap shot series on using these miniatures is because unfortunately the economy around the world is slowly going to the toilet, so using the multiple games for the same set of miniatures is the ultimate pwn, and at the same time you can get more games equaling more savings, and that's just the best way to do things, in my opinion anyways. After all, I am Commander Cheapskate. So there you guys have it. That's good to do for this video. As always, please feel free to comment, like, and or subscribe. Your guys' input is invaluable to us as always. Also check us out on Facebook, Instagram, as well as blogger.com for all the latest greatest hobby news taking place on this channel. That's good to do for this week, guys. I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace out and stay classy.